You've purchased Baldur's Gate 3, installed it, and are now on your 3rd hour in the character creator trying to decide which class to play. All of a sudden, you're gripped by an unavoidable realization. You want to swing a giant sword and chop up bad guys with it, or good guys. I don't judge. Regardless of who the sword is destined to chop up, the fighter is definitely the one who's destined to be wielding it. Welcome back, travelers. I'm glad to see you made it. I'm Kolo, and today we're going to be taking a look at the fighter class in Baldur's Gate 3. We're going to look at each one of the subclasses individually and take a good look at the skills and abilities that you get as you level up. So let's get started, shall we? A bunch of the information and images in this video was also obtained from the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki at bg3.wiki. I'm going to leave a link in the description below. Make sure to check them out. As soon as you choose the fighter class, you're going to get a number of immediate benefits, such as the proficiency to use any weapons or armor that you find or have available. They're proficient in all of it, so you can pretty much use whatever gear you get. The second wind ability, which is a bonus action self-heal that heals a respectable amount of health throughout the game and can be used once per short rest. That's very powerful. And then you'll also be prompted to choose a fighting style. The options for the fighting styles are archery, which grants you a +2 bonus to ranged weapon attack rolls. And it's important to distinguish here that the attack roll is how accurate it is, not how much damage it does. So this is a +2 bonus to your roll to actually see if you hit somebody. So still great to have, but it's not going to increase the damage that your attacks do. Defense, the next fighting style, grants you a +1 bonus to armor class while you're wearing armor. This is super straightforward, +1 AC buff if your fighter has any armor on, which they almost certainly will, so anybody can benefit from this. The next fighting style is dueling. This one is a +2 bonus to the damage rolls when using a one-hander and no offhand weapon. You do still get this bonus if you're using a shield in your offhand, you just can't be using another weapon. So if you're planning on playing with a rapier and an empty offhand, or some kind of one-handed weapon and a shield, this is a very strong option. This is the opposite of what I said about the archery fighting style. This one is a +2 bonus to the damage rolls, not the attack roll to see if it hits. Say you're swinging a weapon that hits for 10, +2 bonus to that is 20% extra damage. This ends up being quite a bit extra damage you do, so it's a good one to have. The next fighting style, great weapon fighting, is also incredibly good. When you roll a 1 or 2 on a damage die for a two-handed melee weapon, you get to re-roll the die once. So think about it this way. You're swinging around a giant weapon. It's already hard enough to hit people with because it's so huge and unwieldy, and you manage to hit somebody with it, and then you go to deal damage and you roll a 1. So you're swinging a freaking school bus around, you hit somebody and deal 1 damage to them. That sucks. That's not fun. So this right here will re-roll that, and you may end up hitting for 10 or 12 damage instead, like you should have. It's really good to have. Anything that'll re-roll a bad roll for you is fantastic. The next fighting style is strange. It can be good under the correct circumstances, but you pretty much have to change up how you play the game to revolve around this fighting style if you want to min-max how you use it. The fighting style I'm discussing is protection, and here's what it actually says. When you have a shield equipped, if an enemy that you can see attacks one of your allies while you're within 5 feet of them, the ally, you can impose disadvantage on the attack. So basically you're deflecting an attack against one of your allies. So this can be really powerful. It's imposing disadvantage on an enemy's attacks is very good. Disadvantage means they have to roll the die twice and then take the lower of the two numbers. So if one of the rolls passes and the other one fails, the attack fails. It's great, but you have to be really close to the ally. 5 feet is not that far in this game. You have to be like standing on top of them to be able to use this ability. And like I said, if you're not like actually planning and playing around it, it's difficult to make enough use of it to justify taking this over one of the other ones. The final fighting style is 2-weapon fighting. When you make an offhand attack, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the attack. This is a big damage buff to anybody that's planning on playing a dual-wielding fighter character. You will definitely want to take 2-weapon fighting 100%. This adds a ton of damage. One thing that I have read is that offhand attacks with hand crossbows already add your dexterity modifier to the damage. So this fighting style is not necessary to use if you're planning on playing that way. But if you're planning on dual wielding melee weapons and, you know, being the guy with heavy armor and 2 swords standing up there fighting, 2-weapon fighting absolutely needs to be one of the fighting styles you choose. As you can tell, each one of these fighting styles can potentially have a very big impact on the gameplay of your actual character. So, like I said, if you want to be swinging that big sword we were talking about at the beginning of the video, great weapon fighting is the amazing choice because it'll end up causing a ton of extra damage passively. So you can get back to chopping up kids or whatever it is you do in your free time. Alternatively, the protection fighting style sets your guy up to be like a tanky protector style of character where you can mitigate some of the damage that your teammates take as long as you guys stick together and everything. It's a cool roleplay thing, but it's just difficult to pull off in the game. Somebody in the comments right now is probably blowing me up about how protection is the best fighting style, and I probably am wrong, but it's hard for me to justify taking that one over one of the other ones. And, you know, don't forget, the fighter is not limited only to melee range either. You can absolutely play a dual-wielding hand crossbows fighter or bow and arrow fighter. There's all kinds of options for you. At 2nd level, all fighters gain the Action Surge ability. This thing is a friggin' monster. Once per short rest, you can use Action Surge to immediately grant your fighter another action for that turn. That already sounds broken right now at level 2, and just wait until you see what a fighter ends up being able to do with 1 action point later on. This thing gets gross. When you reach 3rd level, you'll be charged with one of the most important choices you're going to make for this character. You see, the fighter has 3 available subclasses: the Battle Master, the Eldritch Knight, and the Champion. And this is the level where you have to make the decision, which route are you going to go. Each of these subclasses is going to gain unique bonuses and abilities that are going to drastically change your play style. So we're going to take a deeper look into each one of these after I go through the list of levels that each one of them shares in common. So we'll get all the normal fighter levels out of the way, and then we'll come back and do a deep dive into each one of the subclass specific things. That way it's much easier to understand what each one's giving you. At 4th level, you'll receive a feat, and as always, ability improvement is always a good choice to get your main stats maxed out, but there's a number of actual feats depending on what type of weapons and armor your character is using that you can make pretty good use of with a fighter. The Polearm Master, Savage Attacker, Great Weapon Master, and Dual Wielder feats are all really good for certain fighter play styles. Just take a look at the feats list when you're going through this and see if anything sounds good. If it sounds like it would be good for your character, it probably is. 5th level is huge for fighters. This is when you get the extra attack ability, and you're about to start to see what I was talking about earlier with the action point thing. The extra attack ability allows you to attack twice per action point per turn. So when you swing your sword to do your first attack, you can just attack again for free, and you can already see how that's just doubled your fighter's potential damage per turn. Just wait. 6th level for fighters is going to grant you another feat. This is a fighter unique thing. Every other class in the game only gets feats at 4th, 8th, and 12th levels for a maximum of 3 feats. The fighter gets this extra one at 6th level for a maximum of 4 feats, because you still get the other 3 also. Pretty awesome. Feats are very good, and the fighter can get 4 of them. 7th level is going to be purely subclass specific stuff. So like I said before, we're going to come back to this. Let's just go through the other levels first, but we'll be coming back to 7th level for sure. 8th level, you're going to get your 3rd feat. So 2 extra feats within 2 levels of each other. Really nice. At 9th level, all fighters are going to gain the Indomitable ability. This will allow you to re-roll a failed saving throw and use the new result once per long rest. Like I said before, anytime that the game will re-roll a bad roll for you, that is an incredible bonus to have, because that can get you out of some really bad situations. So this thing's good, and you get it for free just for hitting 9th level on a fighter. 10th level is the next subclass specific bonus level, so we'll come back to this one here in a second. 11th level, all fighters are going to obtain the improved extra attack ability, and as you can probably imagine, this increases the amount of attacks that you can do to 3. 3 attacks per action. And then if you throw haste on top of that, now you've got 2 actions that turn, 6 attacks. And then you've got action surge, and you just got another action back. So now you can do 3 more attacks. It's ridiculous. On a good turn with the fighter, you can clear half the battlefield by yourself. Basically, you're like a whirling tornado of steel across the battlefield, just chopping everyone to pieces. You seriously end up with like an irresponsible amount of attacks per turn on the fighter. You end up being able to do like 1,200 attacks per turn, something like that. That's not the real number, but you'll be doing a ton of attacks. At 12th level, you're going to get your 4th and final feat. Feat levels are always good. Alright, so that's all the levels that the 3 subclasses share bonuses for. So let's go back now and revisit the 3 levels where you get subclass specific things that are different. We'll start at the beginning with the Battle Master subclass. What is that, a Battle Master? Let's take a look at the description that we're given. Battle Masters are paragons of tactical superiority, combining combat maneuvers and experience in the field to dominate every fight. That's a fancy way of saying the Battle Master is essentially a person who has trained in different combat techniques and perfected them, which allows them to produce different and more advanced results with their weapon strikes, such as disarming people or knocking them prone or knocking them backwards, stuff like that. We'll see a little bit of that here in a second. When you first select the subclass at 3rd level, you will be granted 4 superiority dice. These dice are D8s, which means they're 8-sided dice. When you use your battle maneuvers that we're about to discuss, it's going to cost some of these superiority dice to use. You'll also be allowed to choose 3 combat maneuvers from a list of 14 total. If you end up sticking with the fighter all the way to 12th level, you're going to end up being able to choose at least 7 of these 14 combat maneuvers. The effects of the maneuvers range pretty widely from, like we discussed before, knocking people down, knocking them backwards, disarming them. You can goad people into attacking you. There's a lot of different effects that you can choose. It's pretty cool. You get a lot of variety. One cool interaction that you might find useful, one of the combat maneuvers, Rally. You can actually use this to bring back to life a downed party member as long as they aren't completely dead. If they're downed and still doing death saving throws, any kind of heal. You can throw a potion at them and it hits them and splashes healing stuff on them. That'll bring them back to life. Well, Rally will too, because it grants them 8 temporary hit points, so it'll res them. Like I said before, you can just throw a potion, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you don't have a potion on you, or sometimes the arc of the throw is going to hit the ceiling of the building you're in or whatever and won't let you throw it. So it's just something to know that you have available. At 7th level, the Battle Master is going to get a 5th superiority die as well as 2 more combat maneuvers that you get to choose from that list. Pick 2 more that sound cool that you can make use of, and now you have 1 additional use per short rest, so not a bad level. And then finally, at 10th level, you're going to receive 2 more combat maneuvers, so that brings us up to 7 out of 14 total. And more importantly, the superiority dice that you've been using for these combat maneuvers are going to get upgraded from being D8s to being D10s. So now all the superiority dice rolls you have the potential to do even more damage or, higher effects. Pretty good buff. So all in all, you can't go wrong with a Battle Master. You get 14 million attacks per turn like every other fighter, and the attacks are fancier than theirs because you get to put some flourish behind it and knock somebody off their feet, knock them prone, and then slap the weapon out of their hand and smack them on the head and they go flying 15 feet away. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. So if you were wanting to play a character that gives their weapons names and knows them inside and out like an extension of their own body, the Battle Master is your subclass for sure. Next up, we're going to head back to 3rd level again, and this time we're going to discuss the more arcane-focused fighter, the Eldritch Knight. The description of this subclass is as follows. Eldritch Knights study magic to supplement their weaponry, allowing them to overcome resistance from the toughest foes. Sounds pretty sweet, but what does that actually mean? Let's take a look. When you first choose the subclass, you're going to be granted 2 level 1 spell slots, 2 cantrips, and you're going to be allowed to choose 1 spell from the Eldritch Knight spell list and 1 spell from the Wizard's entire spell list. Now, what's the difference between those 2 spell lists? The Wizard spell list is much bigger. You get access to all of the level 1 wizard spells. The Eldritch Knight spell list is the same list, but it's only the abjuration and evocation spells from the list. All the rest of the schools of magic are not there. You also get the Weapon Bond ability, which is going to cast a buff on your main hand weapon that lasts until long rest. This buff is going to make it to where your weapon is impossible to disarm from your character's hand, and if you throw it, it automatically comes back to your hand. So think of like Thor's hammer or Kratos' axe. You throw it and it comes back. Pretty good. This also opens up potential cool throwing builds where, like, if you have a really good throwing weapon, the ability to have that weapon just come back to your hand can drive an entire build. It's pretty good. 7th level is going to grant you 1 more level 1 spell slot, as well as 2 level 2 spell slots. You're also going to be able to choose 2 more Eldritch Knight spells, and the list of options now includes your level 2 spells also, so you'll have more choices than last time. You'll also gain the War Magic ability. This is a passive bonus that allows you to make a weapon attack as a bonus action after casting a cantrip. This is the beginning of a gameplay loop of mix and matching spell casting and weapon attacks together to grant bonuses to each other, and it's a pretty cool way to play the game. At 8th level, on top of the feat that everybody else gets, you as an Eldritch Knight will also be allowed to choose a single spell from the level 2 wizard spell list. So you get all the choices again from the wizard's list. There are some very powerful options here that are definitely worth pointing out. Mirror Image is a very strong spell, increases your armor class by 3 per mirror image, and it summons 3 of them. So you get a +9 to your AC right off the bat. Every time an attack misses the character that cast mirror image, one of the images goes away. So the second attack, you're going to have +6 to your AC. The third attack, you'll have +3. And then finally, the buff will wear off. Really good spell. Misty Step is also absolutely worth talking about. Being able to teleport across the room is super strong. Any kind of mobility increase or movement ability like this, especially a teleport where you don't actually move through things like dangerous terrain, is fantastic. In a tactical game like Baldur's Gate 3, movement is king. The more movement you have, the better off you are. So this is a really good spell. I definitely recommend at least considering it. At 10th level, you're going to gain another level 2 spell slot, 1 more Eldritch Knight spell, and the Eldritch Strike. passive ability. This is kind of a continuation of that idea I mentioned before. This one is going to cause your weapon strikes to grant the target disadvantage on its next saving throw against the next spell you cast, as long as you do it before the end of your next turn. That's super confusing. What does that mean? You hit somebody with your weapon, and then as long as next turn you cast a spell at them, they have disadvantage on the saving throw against that spell. There you go. Boom. So this plays into that loop of weaving spell casts and melee attacks together. Pretty cool idea. At 11th level, you're going to be allowed to choose one more spell from the Eldritch Knight spell list. And then, you get the normal 12th level feat like everybody else. In summary, as an Eldritch Knight, you don't get access to a massive amount of spells, and you're definitely not going to be like a full spellcaster. You're just not going to be able to fill that role, but you can absolutely pick which spells you take strategically and use the magic to supplement your weaknesses in physical combat and stuff like that, and you can absolutely have a nightmare of a character here. I like to think about Eldritch Knights as kind of like a Darth Vader style of character. Like, you're there with a weapon. This is it. This is my weapon right here. This is what I'm going to kill you with. But if I need to thunder wave and blast you backwards a couple of feet, I've got that too. If I need to misty step across the room and teleport right behind you because you're trying to run away, boom, I've got that available too. You're like this creeping wall of steel and magic that they just can't get away from. It's cool. Am I crazy for thinking about it like this? I don't know. I'm probably looking too far into it. Let me know in the comments. How do you like playing your Eldritch Knights? How do you imagine that character RPing? If you're enjoying yourself, also, if you've learned anything, leave me a like down below, leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, come hang out. Let's rewind back to 3rd level one more time. And this time, we're going to look at the 3rd and final fighter subclass, the Champion. The description reads, you approach the complex problems posed by combat with one distinctly effective solution. You hit those problems really quite hard. So this may automatically sound similar to the Battlemaster subclass to some of you. So what is the actual difference? Well, the Battlemaster is essentially a fighter who has trained in all these different combat styles, using their weapons to the fullest advantage to disarm their targets and all those various effects we described earlier. The Champion, on the other hand, their body is essentially the weapon. They're like the big, just really strong guy that happens to be swinging a sword at you also, but he is the dangerous part. The sword is just the tool he's using. Immediately after choosing the Champion as your subclass, you'll be given the improved critical hit passive ability. This reduces the number you need to roll to get a critical hit by 1, and the effect stacks with other buffs that grant you the same effect. So for a lot of people, reading that, it's going to sound kind of weak. I mean, you understand right away having a better chance to deal critical hits is obviously a good thing, but how good is this really? Well, let's look into what a critical hit in Baldur's Gate 3 actually is. When a character performs an attack roll against another character, you roll a 20-sided die. When you roll a 20, it results in a critical hit. The damage roll for a crit will be done with double the normal amount of damage dice. So, for instance, just using round numbers, if you swung a weapon and it had 1 to 10 as its damage range, on a crit, you would throw double the amount of dice, so the range would be 2 to 20 for the damage potential. So this sounds pretty straightforward. You roll a 20 on your attack, you deal possibly double damage. So why is reducing the number by 1 such a big deal? Let's do some math. Rolling a 20 on a 20-sided die is a 5% chance, 1 in 20. So that means every time you roll an attack roll, you have a 5% built-in chance to perform a critical hit under normal circumstances. Reducing the required number by 1 means that a roll of either 19 or 20 will result in a critical hit. So you've doubled your crit chance to 2 out of 20 or 10% now. Each time you reduce that number by another 1, it increases your crit chance by 5%. So that is insanely strong, especially for just choosing the subclass. Like, you get this bonus right away. It's super strong. At 7th level, the Champion fighter gets 2 passive buffs. You get the Remarkable Athlete Jump ability, which will passively increase your jump distance by 10 feet. So that's good. Like I said, more mobility is always good. And you'll also get the Remarkable Athlete Proficiency ability. This one's more unique. It allows you to add half of your proficiency bonus to any strength, dexterity, or constitution check that you aren't proficient in. This just further reinforces the fact that the champion fighter is essentially like their body is the weapon. They're really good at everything that's physical. They're the jock character that just is really good at being strong and being coordinated, and he's also swinging a sword into your head wearing heavy armor. 10th level will grant the champion their final unique upgrade. They will be allowed to choose one additional fighting style from the list we saw at the very beginning of this video. So if you went with 2-weapon fighting at the beginning, now you can take defense or archery if you want to use a bow also while you're using your 2 weapons. Whatever you want to do, you get a choice of another fighting style to help, mold your character's identity. To recap this final subclass a little bit, it's not necessarily as flashy or fancy as the other 2 subclasses when it comes to you don't have combat maneuvers to perform, you don't have spells to cast. As a champion fighter, your bar actually looks pretty empty, like there's not that much stuff to do. And it's not there to be fancy. You're there to do a ton of damage. You take your 47 billion attacks per turn and you do twice as many crits as the other fighters do. And then if you find gear pieces that increase that anymore, even more crits. You're throwing crits left and right. So you can put out quite a bit of damage. That pretty much covers all the information about the fighter, though. We went over all the normal levels that they shared, and then we've just got done covering all of the individual subclasses. Let me know in the comments, what are you guys doing with your fighter? Which subclass are you choosing? What kind of weapons are you going to use? You're going to make your fighter a dual-wielding hand crossbows kind of fighter, or are you going to be up close and personal with a sword and shield or swinging a giant axe? One thing I will say is that even though the fighter might not be the most complicated class in the game, you're not going to have as many min-max opportunities as some of the other classes in the game. But even though that's the case, an argument can be made for almost any other class in the game to dip at least a couple points into fighter for multi-classing because of action surge. It is so strong, it's worth giving up a 3rd feat for most other classes just to get action surge, depending on how you're playing. Because of the fact that it's so easily usable by every other class, I think the fighter deserves a top rank amongst the classes in this game. I think it is simply one of the best, and with the amount of attacks per turn you can do, you can get so much stuff done that it's almost like you have 2 people in that character slot. It's ridiculous how productive fighters can be in combat. That does it for this one though, travelers. I appreciate you watching all the way through. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know how you're playing your fighter, what kind of weapons you're using, and what fighting style you decided to go with. If you enjoyed your time here, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you feel like supporting the channel even more, I've got a link to my Patreon in the video description down below. I appreciate all the support you guys have given me in these past couple of videos. It's definitely greatly appreciated. Anyway, I'm glad you guys got to see me. Do your best to stay alive. Until next time, see ya.